or this session. And again, I had the honor of introducing our good friend Raluca here. Now, Raluca, now it's morning for us, but she's all the way across the big pond right now. It's actually the evening for her. She comes to us from the University of Manchester. Raluca Pisari is going to talk to us a little bit about that transfer process and what it means specifically for the University of Manchester, but also going over into the UK. So Raluca, thank you so much for joining us. We really look forward to what you have to say. Nobody came here to listen to me, so I'm going to go ahead and shut myself off and we'll let you take over from here. Go ahead.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you very much for having me here. It's an absolute pleasure to talk about transfers, especially to the UK, because it's not a subject that gets approached quite a lot. So hopefully this session will be useful for you. And of course, please ask loads and loads of questions because you're the only ones who know what you don't know. And I'm hoping that I can help. So once again, for introductions, I'm Raluca from the University of Manchester. In my role, I work with students from the US specifically, especially undergraduate students who are looking to study at the University of Manchester, but of course, just to come over to the UK to do their undergraduate degrees or sometimes postgraduate degrees as well. So again, it's a very friendly session. I'm more than happy if you want to unmute yourself and ask questions here. I do have a presentation to start with, hopefully give you at least a bare bones of what we're talking about when it comes to transferring to the UK, and of course with some examples from the University of Manchester. But if you have any questions at any point in time, just pop them in the chat, or again, at the end, there'll be plenty of time to ask that. So what I'll be talking about today, obviously, will be transferring to the UK. And I want to walk you through a little bit of a description of the UK system, just so you can then understand later on what we're talking about when we're talking about transferring credits and why sometimes it might be a little bit more complicated than it is in the US. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what the application process would look like, and then where your starting point should be if you're advising students on transferring to the UK, and what types of universities they might have available. Now, obviously, with the UK education system, it is quite a large higher education system, but obviously we don't have the same number of universities that you're used to in the US as a country, but we do have quite a few universities. So we have over 190 higher education institutions in the UK, so plenty of choices. Each of them with different specialisms. Some of them are regional, some of them are based on various areas of industry that you find in that region, and most universities would be comprehensive. So that means that you will find undergraduate, postgraduate, moving on to postdoc at most UK universities, and they will offer quite a decent number of subjects in their degrees. Now, in terms of the UK system, obviously, you already know the UK is made up of England, Wales, Northern Ireland, and Scotland. But when it comes to the education system, the system in England, Wales, and Northern Ireland is a 3-year system for higher education, whereas in Scotland you have 4-year degrees as a standard. The Scottish system is the system that the US system works best with, because obviously you blend the 4 years and it makes a little bit more sense in terms of the way the degrees are split compared to the US. The England, Wales, and Northern Irish system are probably a bit more complicated in the sense that our degrees, and they are full bachelor degrees, are 3 years long. They can be longer, but that's only because you are adding extracurricular activities more so than additional years. The system across the 4 nations, but especially in England, Wales, and Northern Ireland, is a little bit more prescriptive than what you're used to with core requirements. So unlike the US, where in the higher education system, you can choose when you take your credits, which credits you're taking, and you have the option to declare a major much later on in your university career as a student. In the UK, you pick your major from the beginning, which is something that you're probably familiar with if you've sent students from high school straight to the UK already. And you also, especially with subjects that are outside of the social sciences and humanities bubble, it is quite a prescriptive degree. You will have core subjects as a student that you will have to take in order to make sure that you complete the requirements of your degree. In the same time, in order to successfully move from one year to another in a UK degree, you also have to complete a specific number of credits, and you don't have the option to enroll in less credits or more credits to offset the time in which you complete your degree. So in that sense, it is a little bit more prescriptive, well, probably a lot more prescriptive than what you have in the US, because you will always have to have the number of credits that you need in order to be able to move throughout your years in university. It can be good news, especially for students who know what they want to study. They don't want to study any extra subjects that they're not interested in, but it also means that they graduate on time. Of course, assuming that they're successful in their examinations and they pass and they get the good grades they need to move on to the next years. They do graduate on time because they don't have any other options. If they fail a year, of course, they can retake that year, but they will be failing the whole year and they will need to carry on, and that will extend their education. But normally students would graduate on time because of the more prescriptive nature of the degrees that we offer in the UK. And then another key point that I do want to make here, and it's around the terminology between the UK and the US. It's something that you're probably hearing from US universities and colleges if you're a high school counselor, or of course from four-year institutions if you already work in a community college. We do use different terminology. So you're probably used to hearing about transferring, which to you would mean that a student might take 2 years at a community college and then do their final 2 years at a US four-year institution. We talk about or you're talking about transferring credits, so offsetting particular credits or particular subjects within a degree with credits that have already been taken. The credit offsetting doesn't happen in the UK because of the prescriptive nature of the degrees and because of the way we shape the degree and the subjects, the classes that you need to take in order to make up that number of credits. We wouldn't be able to say, for example, transfer half of the credits that you need in a year and then move on with that. We also, from a financial perspective as well, don't tend to work based on if you take 3 classes this semester and 5 classes next semester, we'll charge you differently or change things like that. It's again because of the way we split the degrees and the number of credits that you need to move from one year to another. We wouldn't be able to only partially transfer credit. You can use particular college classes that you've taken to for year 1 entry if you don't have any other type of standardized examinations, which our entire admission system in university is based on in the UK, or if you have completed community college, and of course, or you have an associate's degree or enough credits to be an associate's degree, you can start looking at transferring to the UK. So it's a lot of information and very quickly thrown at you. But again, if there's something that doesn't make sense, or if you need me to repeat anything, please pop it in the chat and I'll be more than happy to cover that for you again. But talking about essentially why a student might consider the UK and might be interested in doing this. It is a lengthier process than it probably would be for the US, and it does make it a little bit more complicated. Students coming to the UK from the US come from a system that offers them more flexibility than what they would find in the UK. But in the UK, you do have that beautiful, beautiful thing of not only graduating on time, but never having to take anything additional that you might not want to do, especially if you know what you want to study. So just to explain a little bit more on that, because our degrees are 3 years long as a standard, we don't have the first year of general education where students kind of find their footing when it comes to university life. That doesn't mean that they're penalized in the sense that the first year to a UK degree does not impact on the final degree grade, but it does impact on the subjects that the student is taking when they're studying in the UK. So in that sense, we do have, you do have to declare your major from the moment that you pick the degree that you want to study, and you don't study external things from that degree, in the sense that if you have a joint honors or a triple honors degree, that would be a dual or a triple major in the UK, or a major and a minor, then of course you will be taking subjects from those areas, but you're not taking subjects outside of that. So for example, if you are interested in studying engineering and maths and you never want to see an English language class again, you will never have to do that, because that's not part of the degree that you're studying. So in that sense, education, higher education in the UK is for students who know what they want to do, not necessarily have a career in mind, but at least they know the subjects that they're interested in, and those are the subjects that they want to study. It is students who are in college or are considering community college might be at an advantage there, because they've already gone through some of the pick and choose phase where they're trying to decide what they want to study. So they might already know, and they think, oh, this is not something that I ever want to see again. These are the only things that I'm interested in. These are the only topics that I want to study. So in that sense, the UK system might be ideal, because they don't have to work through other subjects that they might not be interested in or good at. But in the same time, again, if the student is undecided or they need more time, then the UK system might not necessarily be ideal for them just because of the nature of the degrees that we teach and how specialized we are. We also tend to specialize in our degrees from the moment the student arrives at university. So most universities will have a strong research profile, and students will be expected to engage with research, whether that's to write their assignments, prepare for the exams, do independent study, whatever it is. They will be more focused on that. And there's a lot more emphasis put on independent study in the UK than there is in the US, in the sense that you have fewer contact hours than you might find in the US system. So there are some key differences there. And the reason why it's important, especially when you're considering transferring, is because for students who come from a community college background, they do have a bit more experience in their studies, what they like to be taught as the way they learn. They probably know a little bit more about that. They might be a little bit more focused on what it is that they want to achieve through their degrees. So knowing these key differences between the UK system and the US system might help them with the decision-making process, but also, of course, help them along the journey of going through this transfer process. This is true for high school students as well, of course, if they're considering year one in the UK and they want to use potentially dual enrollment, come over to the UK for various degrees that they want to study. It's again, it applies to them, these differences where they might find it a shorter experience, but if they're decided and they know exactly what they want to do, then the UK system would be ideal for them. So one of the things that was mentioned on the slide was entry requirements, and again, a little bit of a difference here between the UK and the US system. When it comes to entry requirements, universities in the UK, we take our academic entry requirements very, very seriously. So you see on your screen there are entry requirements that are taken from Manchester, but that's not necessarily a fixed thing for all UK universities. Of course, we each have different expectations and different grades that we want students at. But standardized tests is usually how we admit students into university in the UK. So some of you might already know about the famous A levels, which you take in year 13 because high school here is longer than it is in the US. But if you don't have A levels, then you can think of them as AP, IB, or formerly SAT subject tests when they used to be available. So we love our standardized tests in the UK, and we tend to make decisions for admissions based on those standardized tests. It's great in the sense that it's a very transparent process. Each university will explain exactly what the academic entry requirements are for each of the subjects the students can apply to. So that would make the process easier. If you have the grades to get in or not. But in the same time, it's not as easy as it might be in the US because of potentially not taking into account a lot of other schoolwork that students tend to do in the US that students in the UK don't necessarily do. So because we focus so much on these standardized tests, we sometimes maybe miss out on things that we don't consider to be the equivalent in the UK as a whole, the equivalent of our own standardized tests over here. So students who take, for example, honors classes, some universities would accept that as a standardized measure, others won't. So then it becomes a little bit more complicated. But ever since pandemic and having less access to standardized testing, especially for US students, a lot of UK universities have started to make concessions, start looking into alternative methods of testing and admissions for students from the US. And that leads us to the reason why I'm here talking about potentially dual enrollment if you're in high school and taking college credits, or of course, college credit at college level and associate's degrees. The reason why entry requirements are quite important, especially the academic entry requirements, is because degrees in the UK, especially the more specialized degrees, so things like engineering or medical school or law, would come with specific subject requirements for year one entry. And then later on, especially if students are looking to transfer, so starting in year 2 or year 3, they would come with the associate subject requirements. And the first point, of course, is looking at the website or talking to someone like myself from a UK university to talk through the entry requirements, especially those subject-specific entry requirements where we expect students to have taken certain subjects that would lead them or give them the necessary prerequisites to successfully go into the degree and, of course, graduate. So they need to have specific basic knowledge for certain subjects that they need to be prepared for. So those subject requirements, again, it's a relatively transparent process in the sense that we list those onto our websites. It's relatively easy to access, even though it might not be as intuitive as some of the websites that you're used to. It is relatively easy to access. But it starts from there, because if that foundation is not there, if those subject requirements are not met, then the best response you're going to get from a university is going to be suggestions of other degrees that students might be able to look into, rather than the degree or the subject that they're interested in. So it starts from there to see if the student that you're working with has the necessary background in order to be considered for admissions. And that background is established based on the subject requirements that we talk about. Grades are important as well, but when we're coming from a mixture of qualifications, especially if we're looking at dual enrollment or, of course, associate's degrees or college credit, then those grades are a little bit more flexible for students coming from the US, because, of course, each college has their own grading system. Some GPAs out of 4, some GPAs out of 5. Some things are more difficult, others are easier. So there's a bit more flexibility on there compared to specific scores in APs, for example, or specific scores in the IB diploma as well. But the subject requirements are important, because we're looking for students who have some form of background that will help them go into the degree that they're interested in. And because we don't have that year of general education, the first year that you will get in university, and because US students also don't have that 13th year that our students here get for A levels, they are a little bit at a disadvantage here. So it's trying to work through the background that they have to see if they would be suitable for a transfer or for admissions into a UK degree. And again, that will come with talking to people like myself, talking to admissions teams in UK universities, and of course, starting with the website. So it's not as easy as it would be necessarily if you're going to transfer to a US university that has a very clear transfer process. For us, it's a bit more on a case-by-case basis, but we do have information for that, and we can help as UK universities to look into those options. When it comes to advanced standing, and that is what we actually call here in the UK transfer. So we were talking about terminology here. So advanced standing is essentially allowing students to come into their second or potentially third year of their degree. So that would be their final year of the degree. Advanced standing means that we look at what the student has studied so far, and as long as the core modules, we call classes modules over here. So as long as the core subjects of a particular degree have been studied and met, they would be able to transfer over. So they will be given advanced standing. Most universities in the UK would allow a transfer into their second year of a 3-year degree. Some universities, if it's based on an agreement with the community college or with a particular other university, they might allow students to come into their third year of a 3-year degree, but that is usually by agreement only with that particular university or college that the student is at. Most common would be to be able to move into the second year of a 3-year degree. The reason why I keep saying the second year of a 3-year degree is because students need to understand that in the UK, in order to be able to get the credit that you need and the grade to be meaningful, so you're graduating with a classification here in the UK, you need the 2 years, at least 2 years in a UK institution to be able to do that. Because in a 3-year standard degree in the UK, the first year doesn't count towards your final degree classification. So that pretty grade when you're getting a first or an upper second. I'm sure you've heard the terminology, and it was just as confusing as it was for me. But in order to be able to get all of that, you need to have your second and third year at a UK university. So if you're moving over, it might be more advantageous for a student, whether we're talking years spent in education or potentially financially as well, to come over from the first year instead of going to college. However, financially, it might also make more sense to do 2 years in college and then only come over for 2 years in the UK. But those are the options that students need to think about. So when it comes to coming to the UK and be given advanced standing, most universities would look for an associate's degree or sufficient credit in core modules, so in core subjects that our degrees need in order for students to progress on to be able to come into the second year. As I mentioned in the beginning, and again, important to remember, is that partial credit is very, very unlikely to be given for an undergraduate degree, because we need students to have a certain number of credits each year to be considered as full-time enrolled, be in compliance with the visa that they will need to be able to study in the UK, but outside of that, for us to make sure that they have the necessary prerequisites to keep on moving through the degree structure that we offer in the UK. So the transfer will be happening as we take your 2 years in community college or in another US university or a four-year institution. We look at the subjects that you've studied. As long as those meet the core things that we expect in our first year for students, we will happily accept you into our second year for university. If the colleges happen to have some form of an agreement in between them, or if there's a discussion for that, there is a possibility to move her into the third year, but that again is a lot more complicated. And to be able to just do 1 year and graduate with a UK degree, it gets a bit more complicated there. So the likelihood of a transfer would always be into the second year of a 3-year degree in the UK. That would be for advanced standing and the transfer process over to us. There are options for potentially year one entry. So year one out of 3 years. And the reason why I mentioned this is because we often see students applying to university, especially to Manchester as well, where they do have quite a number of credits in community college, but they're not relevant to the degrees that they want to study. And that means that they don't have the necessary background to be able to progress through the degree. So then instead of us being able to offer them year two entry in the 3-year degree, we're only able to make them an offer as we would to any undergraduate student applying from high school to start in year one with us again. And sometimes, most of the times, that is quite disappointing for students because of course they spend 1 year, potentially 2 years already in college, and they want to progress to their degree and hit that ground running when it comes to their careers, but they're stumped by those entry requirements that we were talking about in the beginning when we were talking about the subject entry requirements. So if a student doesn't have the necessary background for a particular degree that they want to study, then it is unlikely that we would be able to offer them this advanced standing that we were talking about and this transfer, because we as in admissions tutors and professors, they're not confident enough that the students would have enough background to be able to go into the specialized nature of the degrees that we offer across the UK as a general thing. Some universities are a little bit pickier with that. Other universities are not as picky, but in general, it's good to start planning if students can, especially as soon as they arrive and they start in college or from high school, especially if they're taking dual enrollment. It's good to start planning the subjects that they'll be taking to help them navigate through the expectations of moving over to the UK. Now, some students might decide last minute that they're considering the UK, in which case they absolutely are more than welcome to start applying, start talking to us, and potentially look at the system that we have over here. But if they haven't planned, and especially if they haven't planned their subjects, then it's unlikely to be able to be offered a place as a second year. So obviously, in terms of looking at the final steps that need to be mentioned here, and I'll go into the questions. I follow there's already a question in there, so quite excited about that. Obviously, to transfer to the UK, it does take working with an advisor. It starts with working with an advisor like yourselves, and then obviously working with us and our admissions teams in the UK to make the process as smooth as possible. And I say that because it's not going to be smooth, but we're going to try, and we're going to do our best to look at what your students have and how we can help them to move over to the UK, whether that would be first year or second year admissions. It's also very important to start doing research and looking at the entry points that each university offers, because some degrees will not allow transfer. So for example, at Manchester, our physics degree does not allow transfers. There's a particular high expectation of very specific grades and subjects for students to take, and we don't allow transfers. But other degrees are extremely flexible. So things like sociology and economics, extremely flexible with transfers. So again, it starts by doing research and looking at each individual subject and degree that the student might be interested in taking, and looking at what those entry requirements are and what those expectations are. And if our websites are not friendly enough, then people like myself, we're very friendly and we're more than happy to help with that. And then sometimes it might happen that although there is a relatively sufficient background, we do get an understanding of what the student's background is, especially academically, in order to come and transfer over. Sometimes academics and admissions tutors might want to have a conversation with that student to make sure that they've made the right decision. So they might be invited to an interview. Most of the times it's quite informal. It's just a conversation it's not an academic interview either. It's just a conversation to make sure that they've made the right decision and that's where they want to be. And sometimes the decisions might be based on that as well. We're talking about how do you apply to these things? Like, what do you do? if you want to come to the UK. If you want to come to the UK in year one, then the easiest way is obviously to apply through Ucas. Ucas is our version of Common App, a bit more complex and less user-friendly, but it is our version of your Common App. So it's an online browser-based system where students detail everything there is to know about their educational background, and then universities get those applications and we make a decision. Ucas has very specific deadlines that help students kind of keep on track with their application, but also puts universities under a particular level of pressure to reply to students and get those offers through. So it starts with becoming more familiar with the Ucas system. If you're transferring over, some students who are transferring at Manchester, that's the case, they will be asked specifically to apply through Ucas, and they will be given instructions on how to apply as a transfer student rather than as year one student and what they need to put on there. But it does help to become familiar with the application system. All universities in the UK are listed on Ucas. Some universities will have their own application system, but all universities will be on Ucas. If your student has not completed their studies yet, then they're likely to be given a conditional offer. What that means is that if they've not taken all of their exams yet, or if they've not finished their college year before they started a transfer process, then they will be given a conditional offer. That condition is usually based on academic achievement, and it's stated with what the expectations are. That happens after various discussions with, if it's a transfer, it will definitely happen after various discussions with the admissions team and admissions tutors. If it's an application direct for year one entry, then that offer letter basically will be sent through Ucas. They have a little system that's called Apply and Track, and that's where the student can track their progress for their application and where they're at. And it's also where they get most of the letters and communication from universities. Again, Ucas is not the friendliest system, and it's also very different from the way US admissions happens because we don't have early application, early decision, or early admissions, or any of that. It follows the timeline that UK students follow, even though other qualifications from other countries don't match the same timeline. And that can be confusing for students, and it can also be quite worrying. So the way it works is that most of the time students apply way before they have their examinations finished. If you work with AP students, or if you work with IB students, or even just final exams in college, really, then you will apply to Ucas before usually mid-January, the year when you're meant to start in university. By mid-January, you wouldn't have your final results, but we need those final results for students to be able to meet the academic entry requirements of potentially a conditional offer. So what happens? Because the panic starts, they will have their decisions from US universities much earlier on, and they're in the UK waiting for a final decision on their conditional offer. The good news is that when you are given a conditional offer from a UK university, that means that we are holding that spot for you until you send us your results and you meet the conditions of your offer. The second good news is most international students will meet the conditions of their offer way before any of our UK students who get their results mid-August, when they're due to start in September. So all other UK students still don't know whether they're admitted in university or not until they've had their A-level results, which happens mid-August. So obviously international students get that confirmation a lot sooner than our UK students. The bad news is that it usually happens after students get their decisions from US universities, and they do have to kind of hold off on making decisions there or replying if they're set on coming to the UK. So if a student is putting in a Ucas application or considering transfers, the advice that we usually give, because you are allowed to make 5 options via 5 choices via Ucas, or potentially more if you're applying directly to universities and you're looking to transfer, is to start talking to as many universities as possible at various different levels that have different entry requirements. You want to have your target universities and you want to have your safety choices to make sure that in case something goes wrong with your exams, you don't quite meet the conditions of your offer, you still have the option to either accept an offer that was lower or potentially go through clearing, which is a very complicated and different process, but there's still an option there if you don't hit the grades that you were expecting to. So that's just something to keep in mind in there. But ideally, if you're applying for year 1 entry, you can go through Ucas. It's not a problem. If you're applying to transfer, then universities might direct you to their own application system, where you would be expected to submit as a student various documents. You might have to meet particular deadlines, and you will be given advice from universities, or you will be asked to submit a Ucas application that will again come with very specific instructions on how to flag to our own internal systems that you are a transfer student, and that you're given completely different enrollment information and instruction there as well. So outside of all of this that I've talked to, and hopefully through your questions, I'll be able to clarify a lot more about what it is that you want to know specifically about the transfer process over to the UK. It's of course important to mention a couple of other little nuggets of information about UK degrees. And that is, we do have options to have your degree extended as a student for 4 or 5 years at university. You can turn it into a 4 or 5 year degree by adding either a year in industry or a year abroad. So if students want to finish with a year of work experience in the industry that they're interested in, then they can add that to their degree. They can do a year abroad at a completely different university if that's what they're interested in. Or the other option is to have an integrated master's as part of their degree. And what that means is that they're not required to reapply for a master's degree. They'll just progress from their undergraduate straight into a master's degree without having to do anything else. Obviously, assuming that they pass their final year in their degree. And of course, they can also do all of the combinations of work experience and masters if that's what they're interested in. That is also open to, of course, admission via college credit, transfer, and everything in between. It just means that it's a lot longer, but it is something to consider, especially if students are interested in exploring that, spending more time in the UK, and they want to have both work experience and a degree at the point in which they finish. We are very happy to now have in the UK our own version of the US post-study work visa as well. So students are, of course, more than welcome to apply and consider their options for employability in the UK if they decide that that's where they want to be, or if they just want that international work experience before they go back to the US, looking for their options there. So that comes a little bit later on when you're looking at career visas, employability, and additional things that you can do. But it can be a deciding factor, especially for certain students that are looking to get the most out of their international experience. It might be worth looking at the options that we have over in the UK for 4-year or potentially 5-year degrees, especially if you're considering a transfer or year one entry for a longer period of time, and you students want to experience the most that they can out of their international options. If they don't and they just want a taste of the UK, then of course they can go to a college or a university that offers exchanges or study abroad with any UK university. Then they can spend a semester or a year with us, outside of anything else that will go into their graduation goals, I suppose. So that's it. I'm going to stop. I'm going to breathe, and I'm going to, of course, open it up for questions. But you do have my contact details on the screen, and I'll pop them in the chat as well if you want to get in touch with me to discuss this in more detail. So I'll do that now, and yeah, we can go into questions.
Well, look, a great job. We really appreciate the overview there. A ton of information, and I think the common theme that we're hearing from this across the summit is going to be, when you can plan, you're gonna have a much better option. So getting started on this process early, using the resources on the websites, and obviously people like yourself are huge assets in that process, can make it much smoother, much more advantageous for a student. Just want to mention a couple comments appeared in the chat. I don't know if Jeanette, if you or Hannah, either of you are interested in expanding on what you added to us. There was really nice additions there to kind of throw those out there. Jeanette, I thought your comment about University of Chicago was really interesting. Student didn't take the AP exams and ran into a problem with that down the line, huh?
Yeah, I unmuted myself? Is that okay?
Great, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, well, he did what you will recognize that strong students sometimes do. He got an early decision to the University of Chicago. So then he thought, well, I'm not going to take the AP test because I know where I'm going. They probably won't take the credits. And he didn't take them. Well, then he applies to go to a humanities acting media kind of program at the University of Reading. And they wanted his AP test from high school, did not care about his grades from U of Chicago, apparently, as much as they did. And it looked like they're following a pretty rigid formula for admitting him. So because he didn't have the AP test, they said, you can come, but you have to do the foundation year. So I would like to know a little bit more about what does the foundation year entail?
Of course, of course.
Sense?
So
And is anybody surprised that he didn't take his AP test? Those of us who have worked with kids in schools. Okay. I mute myself.
no, it's all good. I think obviously working in a UK institution, it is surprising for us when students don't take their standardized tests, because the whole policy of our admissions is take your standardized tests. Outside of that, yes, talking about foundation years. So what happens for the UK, students in high school or post high school being able to flexibly take college credit is not something that we're used to, because we don't have that system here. So students either go to university, they go to do an apprenticeship, or they start their employability and work life, and that's a bit of a rigid structure in that sense. So we don't expect that flexibility of just taking classes and then suddenly having a bunch of credits that you want to do something with. So not a lot of universities yet recognize that as an option for admissions. In Manchester, we just recently started doing that. So again, it's not surprising that if a student doesn't have standardized tests, then they wouldn't be offered year one entry. Because what we're looking for in the UK is the equivalent of A levels. And there's all sorts of organizations out there that did a lot of work on the equivalence of examinations. And the only ones that were kind of on par with what we were expecting at A levels were APs or SAT subject tests when they used to exist. So then there was a bit of a shock there if a student doesn't have APs, even though they might have taken college credit already, they didn't have that standardized test that we're looking for in terms of admissions. So then they're offered foundation. What foundation means in the UK is technically the year that the student is missing from the US when they're coming over. So as I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, we have a 13-year high school system. Students in the US have 12 years of high school, and then they move into 4-year university. We have 13 years of high school, and then you move into 3 years of university. So essentially it's the same length, but it's just different. So that 1 year missing is what foundation comes in to support students with. If you're going into a university specialized foundation, then that foundation would lead only into very particular pathways for very particular degrees. For US students, it's mostly recommended that they go on to those university specialized foundation programs, because if they go into a foundation provider, even though we're happy to accept that, they will also find that they'll be required to take quite a number of English language classes that they probably don't need or they're interested in. So with universities, we recommend that foundation if the student doesn't have standardized tests and they don't, basically to equate that 13th year they're missing as far as our cycle is concerned. And you will find with university foundations specifically that they will offer subjects that lead into the degree that the student is interested in. So if they wanted to do arts and I don't know, music, then the foundation will have quite a high component of all the prerequisites that a student would need to be successful in that. So at Manchester, we don't have an arts foundation, but we do have, for example, our science and engineering foundation. And that is where students take physics and maths, and there's something else that they take. They take physics, they take maths, and another maths-based subject, I think, as part of the foundation, which essentially prepares them to go into physics, maths, or engineering. Nothing else. But it is something that assures the admissions tutors that students have necessary background to be able to happily progress through the degree, and they don't come to the first year absolutely hate it and think maths is not for me, and then they end up withdrawing, but because that's the last thing that we want them to do. So hopefully that answers your question in terms of what happened there. There are ways around it, sometimes with some universities, but it does take a bit of a conversation with someone like myself or the admissions team to highlight those credits that exist already from universities or colleges. In Ucas, that's a little bit harder to do, and I can see Hannah said that Ucas is more user-friendly than Common App. I think that's the first time that I've ever heard that comment, so I commend you for your bravery there. But because for me, that's the first time that I've ever heard that comment, so I'm very happy that someone's actually said that. But sometimes it is a bit more difficult to list all the college credits that someone might have, to highlight to the admissions tutors that there's a bit of background there more so than the standardized tests.
Raluca, I know this is probably a summit all in itself when I ask this question, but can you give us a quick couple-minute thing about the financial aid piece? How does that happen, especially with, and that's a high concern for a lot of students who maybe are transfer students because they started at a community college and are going on to another adventure. They may have chosen the community college in the first place due to finances. What are our options in terms of financial aid, considering the US system is based on the US government? What kind of things do you see students being able to do to make it affordable?
Absolutely. So thank you for that. With the UK, students can use their FAFSA loans to come over, and it works exactly the same as it works in the US. Outside of that, there are certain grants that work as well. So if there is a type of funding that is offered by the US government for degrees, and it's not a grant, it's more in the form of a loan or things like the GI Bill or anything that's got quite a wide reach across state, then it is likely that it would apply to the UK as well. If it doesn't apply to the UK, then students can let us know, and us as a university can make arrangements for that to apply to us as well. So it happens with FAFSA, which is quite recent in the sense that it's about 10, 15 years in the making for us, but it is something that universities will look into. Outside of that, students also have access to various scholarships. Some of them are merit-based, some of them might be essay-based, but they are application-based. So you're looking at the university, you're looking at whatever scholarships they have available, and you start applying for those scholarships. Usually students from the US tend to use their FAFSA or other types of educational funding plans that they have or they've invested in to come over to the UK and pay for their college. To pay for their university life, or they apply for scholarships. It is unlikely, and it is unfortunate, but it is unlikely that the UK will have universities that will offer students a full ride. That's not something that we do, because just like the US, we also have our own version of student loans here. So it's unlikely that that will happen. But usually a combination of the FAFSA loans available is enough for students to pay for their tuition fees and their room and board whilst they're in the UK. And as far as the comparison between the fees, I would say if students have made the decision to stay in state because of financial reasons, then it is unlikely that the UK will be more affordable for them. But if they've made the decision to go out of state, then the UK becomes quite a more affordable option there, because it's 1 year less. If you're transferring, then it's 2 years less. And it can also be significantly more affordable than other tuition fees that you're looking at. It also means that for us, we publish our tuition fees, and those are the tuition fees that stay there. And the expectation is that the students are working towards meeting those tuition fees through scholarships, through FAFSA and their assessment, but they don't change. So they don't become higher or lower based on students' income or anything like that. They're fixed, and that's what it is. So if a student's planning financially, then it's a good start to look at the tuition fees that they should expect.
Okay, we got about just a couple minutes left. Anybody have any final questions? Otherwise, again, Raluca, we really want to thank you for presenting today. Let's see.
Thank you very much, and it's definitely much appreciated. If you have any questions, please reach out. We'll start doing more of these presentations, and obviously you have my contact details as well. But we do have all sorts of groups in the UK of universities that work together. So if you want to hear more about the transfer policies at other universities, you're more than welcome to get in touch with me, and I'm more than happy to get you in touch with everyone else. We're friendly over here, I promise. We're trying to help and understand as much about your system as you're trying to understand about ours. So anything that I can help with, please do get in touch with me. If not, then I wish you a wonderful rest of the day, because you're just starting. And enjoy your weekend. Final notes, and I do realize that this is on a recording, but it is my birthday today, so I'm gonna go celebrate now, and I will let you enjoy the rest of your day and your weekend, and hopefully I will hear from you soon.
Well, thank you even more for the time you've given us today. That's so wonderful. Happy birthday to you. And again, we appreciate all the wonderful knowledge for it. Just a reminder to everybody that this was recorded, so it is going to be on the Summit website, so you will have access to this in the next day or so. Also want to remind you that to please fill out the evaluation form that came along with the program for this, so we can have your feedback to help us improve for future. At 11 o'clock, we'll begin our breakout groups with our final wrap up happening at 11:30 today. So again, thank you to Raluca for the wonderful information. Thank you for all for participating. We hope you're enjoying the summit. And at that point, we're going to go ahead and wrap up for the day. So thanks, everybody.